Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Division III November webinar. We're going to be doing some Management Council and President's Council updates today. I have a few housekeeping points, though, that I want to make clear. First off is that this webinar is going to be recorded, and that and the PowerPoint of the webinar will be available on our webinar page on nca.org, and all of that will be done by the end of the week. We encourage questions, but an instruction on how to ask us a question. You're going to use the Q&A function within the Teams app or in your browser. It's the Q&A function is how you will ask questions. Well, let's go ahead and get started. We have Management Council updates to go through here. You can see we have 7 of those updates, and I am Eric Hartung, and I will be doing those. Louise McCleary is with us too, and she's going to be taking the President's Council updates as well as those additional updates. So the council approved a blanket waiver for a 2-year period for a hardship waiver based on a student athlete's mental health. The process and criteria for the waiver will mirror those of the current hardship waiver. The waiver will provide flexibility for the medical documentation standards of the waiver. What are those standards? Those standards are, first, contemporaneous or non-contemporaneous medical documentation from a licensed practitioner qualified to provide mental health services. Now, also, it must demonstrate that the student athlete's mental health issue or condition occurred during the season in question, occurred before completion of the first half of the traditional playing season, and prevented the student athlete from competing in more than 1/3 of the traditional playing season in that sport for the season. Now, during the 2-year waiver, blanket waiver, the staff will work with conferences to collect information to determine if the current medical standards and criteria are appropriate or need adjustment before proposing any legislative change. I have some championships updates. The Championships Committee recommended and the Administrative Committee for Division III approved a one-time allocation of approximately $800,000 to implement the championship per diem increase that was planned for 24-25, but we're doing it a year early. So that will be for this current year, 23-24. At its September meeting, the Championships Committee, based on membership survey results, narrowed the potential budget enhancements for 24-25 and 25-26 to the following. First, increasing the per diem. 2, increasing championship brackets, which include football. And 3, providing some additional flights to separate higher ranked regional teams. Now, an additional note about those per diems. The committee will not look to increase the size of the travel party. Rather, it will look at increasing the per diem for the current travel party size and let the institutions determine how best to use those dollars. Another survey was sent to all athletic directors and commissioners to seek feedback on budget priorities. That survey will also seek feedback on championships principles. Those championships principles are the length of the championship bracket caps, and the composition of the brackets. The committee plans to review the results of the survey in December and use the results to inform their recommendations at its February meeting. I have a couple of other championships updates. The committee approved a process and feedback instrument for the sport committees to use to gather membership feedback before recommending to the committee any changes that would impact the championship date formula or would have any potential impact on institutional resources. Please note that the committee continues to evaluate using a selection criteria database to help national committees with selection of teams beyond the automatic qualifiers. The committee received initial positive feedback from webinars conducted with championship managers and sport committees, and the committee recommended that educational sessions be conducted with the membership. The proposed date for implementing the selection criteria database is the beginning of the 24-25 academic year. The Committee on Women's Athletics has been reviewing the sports sponsorship for the sport of women's wrestling. And that is to determine if sponsorship has achieved the level necessary for an NCAA championship. Based on 22-23 information, 41 institutions across the three divisions met those sports sponsorship minimums. That's 2 at Division I, 16 Division II institutions, and 23 Division III. At its February meeting, the Committee on Women's Athletics will consider whether to recommend to the three divisions that they sponsor a legislative proposal for a national collegiate championship for women's wrestling at the 2025 NCAA convention. So make sure we have the timeline there. 2025 convention potentially, and if adopted by each division, the championship is expected to start during the 25-26 academic year. In response to requests from the Division III membership to help address issues and concerns with the current staffing of athletic trainers, the Management Council created a working group to identify the factors impacting the ability of Division III athletics departments to hire and retain athletic training staff, and to create recommendations to help address those factors. The working group will begin to review the results of 2 surveys that were sent to the membership. We sent one survey to athletic trainers, and we sent another survey to directors of athletics at our Division III active and provisional institutions. The working group will use those survey results as a foundation for a discussion with the membership at the 2024 Convention Issues Forum. Another Issues Forum discussion topic will be officiating and sportsmanship. This topic garnered significant discussion at the Management Council. There's a lot more to come on this, and you can see, as noted on the slide, that we have learned that 55% of officials indicated they are leaving the profession due to verbal abuse by coaches and spectators. Along with the athletic training working group item, this, officiating and sportsmanship, will be a key item of discussion at the Convention Issues Forum in January in Phoenix. Which leads me to the 2024 convention proposals. The governance structure here, as you can see in that first bullet, is sponsoring 3 proposals for the 2024 convention. And we're going to go one by one here. The first is to revise the Division III philosophy statement. The President's Council agreed to sponsor the proposal to revise the division's philosophy statement, which is in Bylaw 20. Staff received 2 amendments. Two amendments. The first amendment that was received was pertained to the principle of defining the undergraduate, the 4-year, defining the athletics experience as primarily a 4-year undergraduate experience. So that was one of the amendments that was received. The second pertained to the item about assuring that financial aid is not awarded to any student on the basis of athletics leadership, participation, ability, or performance. The 2 amendments would move the items back to their originally stated principles that are currently in the bylaw. So a little bit on process here, and that'll be important. So these are amendments to amendments. So the way that this will work is that on the convention floor, the underlying proposal, the proposal as printed in the official notice, will be moved and seconded. At that point, a delegate from one of the 2 conferences that proposed the amendment will rise and make a motion to accept one of the amendments. That will be moved and seconded. There will be debate and vote on that amendment. If that amendment is approved, then we will move on to the second one. There'll be another motion and a second, further debate, and another vote on the second amendment. If either one of those amendments are approved, then the body will move to a vote on an amended proposal of the underlying proposal. If those amendments fail, then again, the body will move forward with a vote on the original proposal unamended. So a lot more to come on that, but again, two amendments for the Division III philosophy statement proposal. Stunt as an emerging sport for women. This would be to add stunt as an emerging sport for women and establish legislation related to playing and practice seasons and membership. So the Committee on Women's Athletics noted its request to have the 2023 proposal, this was back a year ago, proposal sent back to the committee based on information that became available in very late 2022, December 2022 to be exact. After the convention, the committee received additional information regarding the health and safety protocols surrounding the sport. To demonstrate that the concerns raised by the committee did not relate directly to the sport, the committee, after reviewing the current information, determined it had sufficient information to address its earlier concerns. And this now will be a proposal in front of the Division III membership in January at the business session for consideration. The final convention governance proposal has to do with sports sponsorship minimums in the sports sponsorship minimum number of participants in the sport of tennis. The proposal would change the minimum participants required in tennis from 6 to 4. This aligns the sports sponsorship minimums with the playing rules for the sport. We have one membership-sponsored proposal. The membership is sponsoring the following proposal. You can see it noted there at the bottom of the slide. It's the amendment to amendment deadline. This proposal will amend the amendment to amendment deadline to provide the sponsors of a membership proposal with more flexibility and time to amend its proposal. That proposal would permit the sponsors to submit an amendment to amendment that increases the modification of its original proposal and would extend the deadline from September 15th to November 1st. And finally, name, image, and likeness. During its October meeting, the Management Council discussed the top NIL issues facing student athletes and institutions in Division III. The council noted that Division I is looking at changing NIL legislation to bring transparency to the transactions and oversight of those who want to work with students. Some of the concepts include one, a voluntary registry for NIL service providers such as agents and financial advisors. Another one, requirements for disclosure of NIL deals worth more than $600 by athletes to their schools. Another concept, the development of a standardized NIL contract. And finally, an educational programming for both high school prospects and student athletes. In February, this coming February, our Interpretations and Legislation Committee, the Division III ILC, will discuss these concepts and discuss the development of legislation that appropriately addresses the unique needs of Division III. Thank you very much for listening this far. Louise will provide the President's Council and additional updates.
Hey, before you guys go, we do have one question in the queue, and this is about championships. The question is, has there been any consideration given to removing lodging from the championship per diem and being reimbursed or paid for separately? Lodging is often influenced by location, yet the per diem is not.
Louise?
So Eric, if you don't mind, I'll jump in.
Yes.
Hello, everyone. Louise McCleary. Thank you, Eric, for your updates. And regarding that question, the Championships Committee, when they meet in December and February, we'll make sure that they look at every component in terms of how do we make that per diem go as far as possible. But it's an excellent point that many times lodging, it doesn't matter if it's in a rural location or in a city, is expensive. And then when you add meals in that, the per diem, what we've heard from the membership, is not going far enough to cover those costs. So I appreciate that feedback.
Thank you. And one more question just came in about the legislation. So when will the amendments to the philosophy statement be broadly shared, or are these already shared on the convention resource page?
So again, I'm going to jump in, Eric. So that the chart is completed. I have not checked to see if it's on the convention resource page. If it's not on there today, as we're going through this webinar, it will be on there by the end of the week. And it does, that convention proposal chart does include those two amendments.
I suppose I could have answered that question because I did upload it to the website in the last couple of days. So it is uploaded to the convention resources page under the, I had to double check it before I said that, but it is uploaded to the convention resources page right now.
Katie, anything else before we go to the next update?
That's it. It's all you, Louise.
All right, so let's go to the next slide, which is the Financial and Risk Management Working Group. It's a little hard to believe that this working group was approved almost a year ago, last January, by the President's Council. And really, with the uncertainty around higher education, the athletics landscape, our President's Council thought it would be important to have our own working group that could really examine that. What's going on in college athletics? What's going on in higher education? And so the working group has been meeting consistently since January. And just recently, they came to the conclusion that it would be incredibly valuable to have a third-party vendor really review the finances of Division III. What are our strengths? What are our risks? How do we reduce those risks? What's the mitigation that we can apply? What are recommendations to make sure we're getting the most out of our annual revenue? Are there opportunities to help us strengthen our brand? Are there opportunities to find different corporate sponsors or regional sponsors? So we are in the process of hiring that third-party vendor. The President's Council approved that outside review and the funds that will be needed for it. We anticipate having the third-party vendor identified and hired by December. The working group will provide an update during the business session at convention in January. And the objective is to have those final recommendations and analysis done by the summer of 2024. As the working group, they'll take the lead on this. They'll continue to report out to President's Council. They'll collaborate with the Strategic Planning and Finance Committee. And as that work is being done by the third-party vendor, we will continue to make updates to the membership so that they can track on the work that's being done. It all aligns well. As Eric mentioned around the championship survey, we are in a budget planning year. We start a new 2-year budget cycle next year, starting September 1, 2024. So this outside review will coincide with that very well and allowed our councils and other committees to make the best decisions of how to move forward with our finances to make sure that we're providing the best possible student athlete experience. Congressional engagement, this is something else that we have been tackling for over a year now. You see on the slide there, really the things that we have been working, that we've been focused on of late is, can we get Congress to act, especially in the space of name, image, and likeness? I think all of you know we have over 23 different state laws around name, image, and likeness, and that has created issues for the entire association. So can we get Congress to help in that space? Eric already mentioned about name, image, and likeness. Division I is looking to change their legislation. Division III and Division II will look at those changes to see if it makes sense for our division in Division III, should we make any changes. But no matter how we change our legislation, it can't preempt all of those different state laws. And so that's why we need to engage Congress with that. We also know, based on different lawsuits, that there may be something coming down the road that says that student athletes should be seen as institutional employees. That would be very detrimental for Division III as well as for the entire association. So we have asked all of you, will you write a letter? Will you meet with your federal legislators? Will you invite them to campus? And what we have seen since August, since this effort from the association, especially from Division III, is we saw 5 draft federal bills introduced. Prior to August, there was no engagement in this space. Today, we have 5. We also recently had a hearing in Congress. We're anticipating another hearing coming up. So if you're willing, we ask that you continue to engage with Congress. Right now, it's important around name, image, and likeness, but I think it's even more important, and if President Baker was on this webinar, he would also say, building the relationships now with those federal legislators, really having them understand the unique Division III experience is important today so that we can be better prepared down the road when we're pretty sure we're going to see something in the space of identifying student athletes as institutional employees. And so if you have participated, we thank you for that engagement, and we hope that you will continue to have engagements over the next several months as we're trying to have Congress move in this direction around name, image, and likeness, as well as codifying student athletes as not being employees. So the Sports Science Institute, at the recent council meetings in October, there were 3 key updates, and you see those on the slide in front of you. One is around mental health. We've had a mental health advisory group. They have come up with their final recommendations. They will be given to the Board of Governors this January. We anticipate the Board of Governors to act on that. If they approve them, then they will be given to the membership. And these are areas that all of you have identified. How can you assist us to help our student athletes overcome mental health issues and concerns as they are navigating through their collegiate career? The other one, competitive safeguards, they have met, and they're forwarding a recommendation to all 3 divisions to remove cannabinoids from the banned drug class. So our management council in January will see that recommendation, and then they will act on it. And so it's something that our President's Council had an opportunity to discuss, as well as with the President's Advisory Group members that were in Indianapolis in October. But this is something we are expecting that recommendation for Management Council to review and act on in January. What has been consistently said by our councils is, while there's been some early indication that that may make sense, based on sort of the, cannabinoids are not used to enhance performance. We've also found that penalties around cannabinoids, we've moved to a fully education versus having any games held from students who test positive, that this is a space that may make sense, but it doesn't make sense unless there is broad education to the membership and to our student athletes in this space. And then the last one, all of you have already seen, hopefully, the Concussion Safety Advisory Group has put out the new protocols, and that has been shared with the membership broadly, and it actually goes into effect, though, January of 2024. But all of those resources have already been shared with the membership. So sports wagering is something that continues to be talked about more and more with the councils. This past summer, the NCAA oversaw a broad survey of college-age students, not necessarily student athletes, just college-age students. And the results indicated that more than 60% were gambling. And so you take that, you take the fact that 38 states have legalized sports wagering. You take the fact that all of our student athletes, all of us are on social media. So you have gambling, you have social media, and what we're finding is that is leading to mental health issues for our student athletes who are receiving Well, I asked you to do this maybe in a game and you're not doing it. You know, it may be a friend on campus saying, well, if you could just miss the first 2 free throws, or if you could do something else. And it's steamrolling. It's a huge issue for all college athletes. And even at Division III, they are experiencing the same level of pressures around sports wagering. So what the NCAA recently did is that we sent out an e-learning module. It's for all current and prospective student athletes. It's not required, but it is there. It's a peer-to-peer education. We've had over 2,000 student athletes view it. We are hopeful that all of you will continue to share that with your coaches, to share with your student athletes. And then in addition to that e-learning module, there are more resources on ncaa.org. But this is something that President Baker, staff feel that we need to make sure that we stay ahead of it as much as we can and continue to work with our student athletes to educate them about the dangers of sport wagering, but also how to protect themselves if they're receiving negative social media content, and how to navigate through that as well. So these are just 2 additional updates that we wanted to make sure to share with you in the last 4 or 5 minutes. But I think all of you know that strategic planning and finance also recommended that we do a full review of our enrichment fund. So that's money that goes to anything that is not a championship. It's programs, it's resources, it's initiatives, just to make sure that that approximately $8 million that we use annually is actually meeting our strategic priorities. And so that has been approved. We have hired an outside vendor, and the work is going to be done in 3 phases. In phase 1, it will be programs. So think the student immersion program, the senior woman administrator program. Those types of programs will be reviewed. In phase 2, it will be all of our diversity grants. And then in phase 3, it will be the conference grant, the dollars that we give to each conference at the beginning of the year to support different initiatives for all of their conference members. We expect that also to conclude by the summer of 2024. And as I mentioned, with the higher level, broader financial analysis, this review of our enrichment fund will line up very well as we go into a new 2-year budget cycle. And the very last 2 slides, the federated playing rules, this was actually taken care of in the summer by Management Council. They have ratified and sort of set the course for Division III specific playing rules process. We now, with the new Constitution, can have federated playing rules in Division III. And so it was important to figure out that process. And what you see on this slide and the next slide are the key elements to it. I think most of you know that on our playing rules committees, many times there are 2 to 3 Division III members out of a committee of possibly 9. And so what this new process says is that those 2 or 3 Division III members will work consistently with the sport committee. So let's say it's a rule that's coming through possibly for women's lacrosse. Those 2 to 3 members on the rules committee will work with the full women's lacrosse committee to say, okay, here's the rule. Does it make sense for it to be a common rule, which means it would apply equally the same for all 3 divisions? Or should it be different for Division III? They will work together before that rule goes out to athletic directors, commissioners, and head coaches for what we call the comment period. And when those comments come back and that feedback, those 2 groups will work together again to say, does this make sense to be a Division III specific rule, or should this be a common rule? From there, the members on the rules committee, the Division III members, if it's a Division III specific rule, they will be the ones to vote on it. The other members will not participate in that vote. And then, Katie, I think you're on the next slide. Good. Then as it goes up to prop, it's the same thing. Well, prop has multiple members, 2 to 3 Division III members. If it is a Division III specific rule, only the Division III members of prop will vote on it. And so what this new process ensures is, one, if it's important to Division III, we're going to have outside voices that are helping our rules committee members. And two, it would just be the Division III members on those committees who would be voting something for it or not for the membership. And so we just wanted to make sure you had that information. There seems to be a lot of questions of late around it. And so wanted to give it to you. And if there's questions about it, happy to answer it either on this webinar or at any point you can email me or others on the staff, and we'll make sure to get those answers for you. Katie, I think the last one just says questions. I know we're out of time, but we'll see if there's anything that has popped into the Q&A. And otherwise, this recording, this PowerPoint will all be found on the Division III webinar page.
Louise, there are a couple questions in the Q&A. The first one pertains to the new D2 video streaming partnership. The question is there discussion on something similar to this championship partnership announced or coming to D3, basically as new revenue streams are looked at? Any update there that in turn would go to assist the championship experience?
You bet. So Division III is absolutely looking at it. So Division II is in a pilot. What we're doing in Division III is watching how that pilot goes. We have heard pretty loudly and clearly from our membership, paywalls maybe are not the best thing for Division III. However, at the same time, we have heard if there was an opportunity to have a high quality web stream of every round of the NCAA championships, that would be a win for our division. The other thing that was sort of in that question is just so you know that for this Division II pilot, any revenues that are generated do not go to Division II. They actually go back to Hudl and Warner Brothers, the ones that oversee that contract. But it is something that we are looking at. It is a goal to be able to say that every round of every NCAA championship will be streamed in a similar manner to how we stream our national championships right now, with announcers, multiple cameras. So that's a goal of ours that we're working towards. But we also want to make sure we don't set it up in a manner that does not work not only for our fans and our families in terms of a paywall, but also for our institutions that might be responsible for producing those events.
Thank you. And one more question in there right now regarding the enrichment fund and that evaluation. Will all programs, programming, et cetera, in the enrichment fund eventually be evaluated?
They will. I didn't list them all, but the idea is in phase one, we'll do all the programs. And then in phase two, we'll take care of the diversity grants. And then phase three, we'll take care of the conference grant. Again, for those who don't know, out of that $8 million, about 75% fund two initiatives, the diversity grants and the conference grant dollars. So the other 25% of the enrichment fund will be captured in phase one.
Thank you. And that's the only question I have.
Okay. Well, most of you stuck around until we ran a few minutes late. We thank you for that. For those of you who are heading into fall NCAA championships, we wish you the best. All of you have probably started your winter competition, so good luck. And we will see you again in December for our December webinar. But thank you so much for joining us today.